Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 31st episode of Chin-Quee Chats, the bite-sized podcast where we talk movies, sports, and everything in between. I am your host, Matthew Chin-Quee, and this week I am joined by my good friend, fellow Fortnite player, the guy who carries me a lot, Mr. Roman Arbisi. How are you doing, Roman?
I'm doing good, Matthew. I'm really excited to finally be on. We've been chatting for a while now, ever since you downloaded Fortnite, and then, now here we are. We finally got me on, and I'm excited, and I've been listening to your podcast for a while now, and they're pretty great, so I'm pretty excited to be a part of this. And yeah, Fortnite, man, we're finally taking a break and talking about some movies, even though that's what we talk about when we play. But, sometimes you got to make those call-outs, and you got to kill those guys. So
yeah, finally we're actually getting some dedicated time rather than just having, cartoon characters running around and shooting each other while we're talking, right? So
yeah, exactly.
I mean, we've even we've talked even before that too, but it's only kind of been over the last few months that we really gotten to talk a little bit more, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
Got to know a little bit more about how your mind works, and you're not just a cranky old man.
Yeah, I know. There's this weird perception of me, I think, in the online space where I do kind of appear like that, apparently. But it is what it is. Nothing is like it seems on the internet ever. But it's been really cool, chatting with you just regularly, and now finally podcasting on this episode. So I'm pretty excited, and it was kind of like a spur of the moment thing too yesterday.
Yeah.
Where you brought it up, and I was like, oh well, I have time tomorrow outside of having to bring my cousin to the airport. But here we are, man. We got this. We got this, man.
Yeah, and speaking of this episode, this week's topic is we're gonna tackle some of the. We're gonna talk about Netflix films, some of their Netflix originals. Last week, Mute came out, and Roman is very opinionated on it. I might be hyping it up a little bit, but I really liked his rant the other day when we were talking. So hopefully you can get something similar to that. And then they've had a couple other originals come out already this year. We're in March already, and they've already had quite a few. And then maybe touch on some of their films in the past. And then the free chat segment, we're going to continue the Netflix. The Netflix theme. I'm not sponsored by Netflix, but if Netflix would like to sponsor me, I'd greatly appreciate that. That'd be really cool. But yeah, we're going to talk about some of their TV shows, which, spoiler alert, I think that their TV originals are much better than movie originals, and I think Roman agrees with me there. But for now, we're going to take a quick break and then come right back in for the free chat or cinema chat segment. And we are back for the Cinema Chat segment, and we're talking about Netflix originals. Now, Roman, I want to lead things off with the most recent one, and that's Mute by Duncan Jones. Now, this is a quote-unquote spiritual sequel to the much-beloved Moon. I really love that movie, Roman. I know you like it. You're not as high on it as I am, but it's pretty much universally acclaimed. Most people love the film. It's kind of a sci-fi indie film that came out in 2009, and Duncan Jones finally come out with his spiritual sequel. What did you think of Mute?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to replicate what I did the other day, but basically, I've never gotten a migraine while watching a movie before, and about a quarter of the way through, I just realized my head was just pulsing with just anger, seething anger because of what I was watching on screen. And I knew going into it that it was likely pretty bad. I was sitting at, I believe, 8% on Rotten Tomatoes at the time of me watching it, and now it's gone up to 13 or whatever. But there's a really good chance I was going to dislike it. But sitting there and watching it, I truly couldn't believe just how poor the film was. And I really dig that aesthetic of this science fiction world that looks very similar to Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner, more than even 2049 really. But and science fiction has recently become my favorite genre because of just the way that science fiction films are able to incorporate this humanity into larger than life worlds that look similar but feel a little bit different, because down the line we could end up looking in like we're in a world like Blade Runner or maybe even Mute, I guess. But yeah, it is a spiritual successor to Moon, of which I thought was fine, like you mentioned. But and throughout Mute there are just shoehorned in sequences, not sequences, but Easter eggs, I guess, from Moon, and it's like, okay, like we get it. But beyond that, the movie just has a really hard time connecting, like on any level. Like nothing works, nothing. The script, the direction, the sound, everything is just so mediocre, and I'm like midway through, like I said out loud to myself, what is happening? What am I watching? I'm not entirely sure what's going on. I didn't care for any of the characters. There wasn't a single likable one. There was one you didn't want to root for. There was one, not even one that you hated just because they were a despicable person. I mean, there's a couple things in there with like pedophilia that they deal with, which is really, really touchy. But the way that they handle pedophilia, like, it just makes me so angry that at Duncan Jones for like trying to just figure out what he was trying to do with that subplot, with that character, and the conclusion that it kind of comes to is more disgusting than anything, and it just made me really, really upset because there are so much better ways to handle it, and the way in which he handled it, like, it wasn't even handled. Like it's like he didn't even approach trying to handle that. But no, I'll be amazed if I see a worse film this year. Because I hated it more than Transformers 5, and I loathe that movie.
And that movie is awful.
But it is really bad. Like, on a technical level, technically Mute is better than Transformers 5, but there's just so much nothing in Mute that, like, there's no value. I would not want to rewatch it. I would not want to watch it while drunk and maybe get something out of it. I can probably do that with Transformers, but it's just so ridiculously awful that I couldn't recommend it to anybody, and it's the movie that it's a straw that broke the camel's back for me, and it made me, inspired me to write an article about Netflix's lack of quality control, which we'll probably dive into here in a little bit. But no, it's a movie that I just absolutely cannot stand, and I hate thinking about it, talking about it, because it's just so frustrating. It's just such a terrible film.
See, that's the rant that actually sold me on the film. That's why I really wanted to watch it, which ironically I actually haven't seen it yet, because Mute was actually one of my most anticipated films coming into 2018, because I've loved 2 or 3 of Duncan Jones' movies so far. I hated Warcraft. I had no idea what was going on in that movie. Especially for someone who's not really well versed in the lore or whatever. I was expecting to kind of, for lack of a better phrase, have my hand held throughout the movie just to ease me into the world, but they just throw you into it and you have no idea what's going on with Warcraft. But his other films, Moon and Source Code, are some of my favorite films. I love the thoughtful sci-fi elements to them, similar to both of our favorites, Arrival. Those type of sci-fi thinking pieces I love. And over the past few years, we seem to have some sort of resurgence from them. So I thought, hey, maybe Duncan Jones can do it again with Mute. Then I heard the reviews, and it was really disappointing. And I don't know. I hope that Duncan Jones can bounce back after this. He's kind of in a similar boat for me right now as David Ayer, because Ayer has had he had two really great films, End of Watch and Fury. And then he even had written Training Day way back when, and lately he hasn't been doing so well. Suicide Squad, and then another Netflix original that came out 2016 or 2017, just last year, Bright, which was another critically panned Netflix film. So maybe some of these directors who are trying to get back into it shouldn't be going to Netflix or trying to sell their films to Netflix. Or if you see their film popping up on Netflix, maybe that means you should avoid it. Hopefully we don't see Neil Blomkamp having a Netflix original anytime soon, because that dude needs a win badly as well.
I would agree that I think everyone is in the same boat now, in agreeing that Duncan Jones and David Ayer are in the same boat. Not only did they just make pretty mediocre films before they went to Netflix, because David Ayer had Suicide Squad, which was just bad, and then Duncan Jones had Warcraft, which was, to me, was somehow better than Mute, but still terrible. and then they come to Netflix, and Bright comes out, which is their biggest produced film yet, and it was just horrendous. One of the worst films I saw last year. And then right after that is Cloverfield Paradox, which we haven't even touched on yet. And then Mute, which is just horrible in every way. And it's like these. I appreciate what Netflix is trying to do in giving like directors an ability to get their work and art seen by millions of people, because they're up over 118 million subscribers as of January. And it's like, that's super impressive, and that's great because millions of people can see their work without having to really go pay and see it in a theater. That's great. That's awesome. But the work that they're producing is just so frustratingly mediocre. I don't know what they're trying to do with their films, and because their TV stuff is great, and the stuff that they purchase that make its way around the festival circuits, like Mudbound, which is Oscar nominated in multiple categories.
Meyerowitz stories as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that was even talked about being possibly nominated for a couple screenplay nominations, even some best supporting actor. And it's like, Netflix has like really good ideas and really just horrible ideas. And I feel like all the stuff that they themselves are producing and not purchasing off of a festival circuit to get, those films seen by millions of people, like, it's just clear that they're just not a competent production company. And the fact that they're just pumping money and millions into these science fiction movies just are not helping them whatsoever.
That poses a question, and you brought up Cloverfield Paradox. I want to get to that eventually, but has Netflix become the new straight to DVD? Because with the Cloverfield Paradox, just as an example, I don't know if I can 100% confirm it, but I had been reading somewhere that it was originally another movie, and then J.J. Abrams, the producer, the kind of mastermind behind the whole Cloverfield universe, had bought that movie, seeing as other people didn't want it, and apparently because it was bad, and then sold it to Netflix, and Netflix just kind of picks up the scraps. They're picking up all these films that nobody wants to distribute, and does that mean that the new straight to DVD sort of thing is, considering DVDs are kind of dying out?
Yeah, I might agree with that, simply because Paramount had the film for a long time, and it was supposed to come out, I think, in October of last year. And a lot of people, I don't think it's confirmed either, but I think a lot of people have some solid evidence and speculation that Netflix is just purchasing these films just to get them out there, because that Super Bowl spot was tremendous and incredibly well placed, and it got the hype rolling, and it was right after the Mission Impossible trailer, which people are all high on, and they were like, not only are you seeing the premiere trailer, but you can watch it tonight in a couple hours after the game is over. And it's like, that's super impressive, and I'm glad that they're doing that. But again, it's like straight to video, straight to DVD quality, and it's like, to me, like, again, like Netflix, like, I understand what they're trying to accomplish. I just don't think they know how to accomplish that. And I just feel like, and I put this in my article that I'll mention it later, but I feel like they're just eating with their eyes and not their stomach. Like, they really care about quantity and not quality. And it's just, they're really losing control, because there was an article that came out recently that as of this year, Netflix is eyeing 700 original properties. Obviously some television and some film, but again, like, that's a lot of stuff. Like, that's a lot of stuff you have to oversee, and eventually you're going to probably just completely lose your grip and just slip down that slope, and you'd be in really big trouble for the brand.
Yeah, right now I'm looking at an article. It's saying that 54 shows and movies will debut in March alone on Netflix, which is an absolutely astounding quantity. Considering where they started, in school, I just happened to do a case on Netflix and reading up where they started, and it's reading where they came from and how they kind of beat Blockbuster, quote unquote, is really impressive, and kind of worries me, because they should be dominating the industry, and not to say that they're not doing well right now, but they should be doing a lot better than they have with their originals so far, like Cloverfield Paradox, like Mute, like Bright last year, sort of thing. But not everything's bad. Even this year, I don't think everything's bad. Have you got a chance to see A Futile and Stupid Gesture, which came out?
No, I've heard some pretty decent things. Haven't gotten around to that though, but I want to.
Yeah, so this is a movie that it stars Will Forte and Donald Gleason, and it's about the creation of the National Lampoon magazine, and I don't know. I'm trying to personally. I'm trying to break 200 2018 movies this year, and I hadn't even heard of this film. So I was like, well, it's an 2018 release, and I can watch it for free on my couch. So I'm going to throw it on, and I ended up liking it a lot. Production value. It looks almost made for TV, which may bring it back to kind of the straight to DVD argument. But the kind of absurdity and the dark comedy aspect of the film, and the fact that it breaks the fourth wall so much and does it in a way that's pretty effective, because a lot of films try to break the fourth wall and they don't do it effectively, and a lot of the times it feels amateurish. But this one, it works, I think, pretty well. You have from Community Joel McHale, who actually plays Chevy Chase in the movie, and they kind of do a wink wink to the audience. He kind of just looks at the camera. He's like, I don't look anything like Chevy Chase, but let's just roll with it. That sort of thing is kind of the jokes that they come along with. And there is some absolutely dark humor, which I know won't resonate with a lot of people, but for me, personally, most jokes aren't off limits, and I'll laugh at anything. So a futile and stupid is it? Yeah, I thought it was a stupid futile gesture, but it's a futile and stupid gesture. It's a really almost mockumentary-esque film that came out this year from Netflix, which was not a super hit, but it was a hit.
Yeah. And I think that, a lot of their films that end up usually being quite good or, fair in quality, they really get buried by these big movies, like Mute, Cloverfield, and Bright. And it's like, that's really upsetting, because a film like Mudbound, I haven't gotten to see it yet, and I really want to, and I probably will before Sunday. But again, it's like Oscar nominated, and a film like that, like you said, the production value isn't very high, but it's quite good and quite enjoyable, and it's a mockumentary. And I feel like when Netflix kind of takes a step back and just stops letting their ambitions get the best of them, they make some pretty decent products. Like the Meyerowitz stories, I really, really, really enjoyed for most of it. Mm-hmm. And I've heard that The Ritual is a pretty solid British horror film, or European horror film, that came out in February as well. And I've been meaning to get around to that. And they got a lot of good products coming out this year, and a lot of good things that, say, hey, listen, we've got our grip on things. But, again, it's just like, when they just really set their ambitions high, like they just really lose focus, and they really just feel like they're getting like greedy for saying, hey, we're putting out 700 things a year. Even back in 2013 alone, they produced just over 100 pieces of original content, which is more than any network or cable channel that you can find on your TV. And it's like, to me, that's a lot, because they haven't even established like a solid footing as to where they're going to be. I think in like 5 years, they're just producing and producing and producing and producing. If you have the money, fine. But again, like the quality is really important, because the brand, that iconic red N, I mean, like that's a pretty big deal. And if you're associating like bad films like Mute over films like the futile gesture one, and like Mudbound and Meyerowitz stories, that's a bad thing and not good. And they should really be pushing those smaller films over films like that we've talked about.
I wonder if it's a case of Netflix still isn't sure what they want to be. 10 years ago, or not even 10 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, they were a streaming service buying the rights to movies and allowing people to stream them. And now they're trying to transition to a studio. But when you look at studios such as, say, Disney, for example, they don't do these R-rated Oscar dramas, right? They don't ever go into those. They know what they are. They do either blockbusters or kids movies, and that's what they are. Warner Brothers, they do these blockbusters and they do these dramas, sort of thing, but they don't really. They have their own division for kids and the younger audiences. But Netflix, they're all over the place. They have, they have a rom-com that came out a couple weeks ago. They have a sci-fi horror with Cloverfield Paradox. They have a couple years back, they have Oscar movies, or even with Mudbound, they have Oscar movies. And then they have like anime adaptations with Death Note and Fullmetal Alchemist, which, no, garbage. They don't really know what they're doing right now, and I think that they could benefit from either seeing as how some of their smaller films are more successful, saying, okay, we're only going to produce smaller films, or they put their entire 100% effort into these bigger films, which of all the Netflix originals that have been really hyped up, and maybe I can count them on one hand, Beast of No Nation, Mute, Cloverfield Paradox, and then Bright. There's maybe those that have been really hyped up by the media, have like TV spots and whatnot. One of four have hit, and maybe there's some more that I'm missing, but they're big hyped one. They're big blockbusters per se. They haven't hit at all.
Yeah, they've just completely missed the mark on that. And I just think that like their ratio of bad films to good, like you can't even comprehend like the numbers. Like you just really have to dive deep into it because they have so many Netflix originals coming out. And again, like you mentioned, like 6 to 7 years ago, they were just putting on movies or TV shows that we've probably already seen, and it's good for convenience and a rerun. If you want to have a marathon, that's great, that's awesome. You want to binge, that's awesome. That's what their identity was, and that's when they were thriving. So when they created House of Cards, which obviously is now coming to its end due to unfortunate circumstances, but that show was the first online only web show to get Emmy nominations, and it got 8 in its first season, 13 in its second. It's like, that is Netflix. Like that's their identity. And like, we'll mention it a bit later when we get into the TV discussion, but they're just having a really bad identity crisis because they're just one production company and they're making just a slew of different products. So it's really hard to find some footing as to the path that they want to go down as a company. And I feel like they don't recognize this for some reason, and they caught fire so fast once they started allowing audiences to stream their content through a PlayStation or Xbox or TV in 2007 or 8. And it's like just reevaluate your business model and kind of figure out what you want to accomplish here, because if they just take their time with some smaller films and release like 1 or 2 every couple months, just like a regular production company like Universal or Disney, even though it feels like a Disney movie's coming out every week now. But
it basically is at this point.
Yeah. But then again, when you look at Disney, like they've got this long storied epic history and they've been around for hundreds of years.
And again, they have their own divisions, right? They have, even though a Disney movie is coming out every week, say, let's use April to May, for example. You have the Marvel Studios coming out, and then if the Fox deal goes through, you have the Fox division, and then you have a Lucasfilm division, and you have the Pixar and Disney, or in the Disney animated division. They're all different divisions, whereas Netflix is just Netflix.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really dangerous, and that's something that I feel like they're probably going to get trapped by. I feel like if they just open up their divisions to allow for a little more breathing room. I mean, apparently like the Troll Hunters series on Netflix is apparently pretty good, and plus it's catered towards a kid-friendly audience, so they do have some gems in there. But again, like it's like once in a blue moon. It's like, it's just kind of amazing to me how they put out so much great content, and like I would say 9 times out of 10 it's pretty garbage. But again, but if you just look at the consensus of it, personal opinions aside, but it's kind of odd. It's kind of like a paradox, I guess. It's kind of just weird.
The Netflix paradox is what we could call it.
Yeah, that's actually the title of the article I put, The Netflix Paradox, Netflix's Lack of Quality Control.
I was about to take that title because I'm going to write an article about that, so I guess I can't use it now. So thanks for the heads up. Just one more question before we end the Cinema Chat segment. Do you think that there's a disparity between us as people who watch 100+ movies a year, or and people who are just kind of more casual movie watchers? And most casual movie watchers have Netflix. Like, say my mom, I went home for reading week last week, and she's always watching these crappy Netflix original films just because they're easy to watch, they're free, they're right there, and there's something new. Do you think that possibly could be a reason why Netflix isn't putting as much effort into them, because they know that they already have the subscribers, and people just, they don't really care, right? Because it's so convenient.
I think that's fair, and that's a good point, because sometimes I would come home from work late at night. My dad loves watching movies. He'll watch pretty much anything just to get some entertainment, and sometimes I'll come home, I'll be like, what are you watching? He's like, I'm just watching this new Netflix movie. And I'm like, when the hell did this come out? Like,
I didn't even hear about this.
And I sit down and watch
films now.
Exactly. And, I sit down and watch a few minutes, and I'm just like, I can't bear this. But mildly enjoys it sometimes, and he supports my reviews and my writing and whatnot, and he read my Cloverfield Paradox review and watched it, and even he caught on and was like, so why did they have to make this movie? Why did they have to explain everything? I already liked the first Cloverfield and 10 Cloverfield Lane as it was and everything. And so I feel like, my dad's only one person, but again, I feel like some people are kind of catching on, even like he's not going to watch Mute because I said it was that bad. But I mean, I don't want to say that I don't want to make it sound like condescending, but maybe just Netflix isn't for us. And I feel like that's a fair point, because there are some films in there that we might enjoy as people who really truly care about this filmmaking experience and the quality and all that stuff, and some people just use it for quick access to entertainment. I think that's fine, and I think that's fair if that's the type of person you are that wants to watch movies like that, but maybe it's just not for me, and maybe it's not for you and a bunch of other people as well. But again, I feel like maybe one day people will kind of catch on and say that Netflix is kind of scrambled right now.
And to counter my own point, I just kind of thought of this halfway through asking my question. If Netflix is serious about making Oscar pushes, and we've seen that they somewhat are, they've had these instances where we want to make an Oscar push. They were releasing our film in theaters to be eligible, then they have to be they can't just be catering to people who like to put on the film as background noise, or just like to put on the film just for some random entertainment. They need to be serious about the quality of the films that they're putting out, and the quality of films that they're producing, the quality of films that they're choosing to stream, or else the Academy isn't going to take them seriously, because the Academy, as flawed as this may be, they are very stuck up about their opinions, and they are very opinionated on the type of studio that you are, and they already have it out for Netflix. Well, speculation, they already have it out for Netflix, but I think we all know that they probably do, seeing as at some place like Cannes, the Netflix logo came out and it got booed. So if they're very serious about making awards pushes, then they might need to clean up their act a little. But if not, then more power to them, because they are still a great business and they're still making bank.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree.
Well, we're going to take a real quick break, probably get some water because I'm thirsty, and then we're going to be right back after the free chat segment. We're going to talk Netflix TV originals, which are significantly higher quality than the movies. I think we could all agree on that. We'll be right back. And we are back for the free chat segment, where we are going to be talking about Netflix TV originals. And I think that in terms of pop culture phenomenon, the TV originals are much, much bigger. When you look at stuff like Stranger Things, which it might be the biggest TV show of the last 2 years, or even the Marvel Netflix shows from Jessica Jones, Daredevil, and then Luke Cage, and the one that we won't mention, and then the team up after that. Those are some. I would argue that the Netflix Marvel movies, or Netflix Marvel TV shows, in some ways has surpassed the hype of even some of their theatrical release films. So their Netflix TV stuff it's doing pretty well for itself.
Yeah, I would agree. And that Marvel Netflix division, we've mentioned divisions quite a few times, but that division is really thriving. Daredevil and Punisher are just amazing television shows. Jessica Jones was all right. Luke Cage was okay. And then Iron Fist is, well, and then I haven't even gotten around to seeing The Defenders, because there's just so much stuff I have to see and I prioritize. But yeah, Stranger Things. I mean, Game of Thrones is popular and all, but Stranger Things to me is within the last couple of years, it's just insane how much of a fan base that's created, and how popular it is, and how it kind of reignited this whole kids on bikes in the 1980s stuff. And I really like that show, and I really appreciate it. But the best thing that they have created, maybe outside of House of Cards, which I still haven't gotten through all the way, outside of a couple seasons, but Mindhunter is one of the most dazzling and spectacular pieces of entertainment I've seen in a long, long time. As someone who's just insanely obsessed with like crime dramas, and kind of just peering into that slice of life, and kind of, it's a show that really creates like discussion and debates and stuff like that to have with your peers on how to approach and get into the minds of like how a criminal or other person thinks. And it's one of the most amazing shows I've ever seen, and pieces of entertainment. It's better than most movies I've seen, and I guess if I want to be that guy, it's like the best 10-hour movie I've seen in a long time.
I think it's kind of interesting that their TV originals, whether that be House of Cards or Mindhunter, or even I actually forgot about this one, The Crown, which I haven't seen, but from all the awards it's gotten, it's got to be pretty good. Netflix TV seems to attract a lot more of the big talent in terms of behind the camera. You have Fincher with House of Cards, and I believe he did Mindhunter as well, right?
Yes, absolutely.
You have even the Wachowskis, where whether you like them or not, they're a huge name. They come to Netflix for I think it was the OA or something, or Sense8.
Yes.
And then you have I guess the Duffer
Sense8
Brothers
was Shyamalan. The OA, I believe, was Wachowski.
Yeah, well, even then you have Shyamalan, you have these big names, and then for the Netflix movie originals, you don't really get those big names. Now that may be because Netflix originally established themselves as the TV with House of Cards, but I don't really have any analysis on that. It's just an interesting bit of factual information that I just thought of.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point, because when you look at like their films, they've got smaller time directors like David Ayer and Duncan Jones, which amongst our film nerd community are pretty popular. You've also got Noah Baumbach, who also directed Meyerowitz Stories and wrote it as well, and another small time guy, but really popular in our community. But then when you look at their TV stuff, I mean, they've got really big names attached to that, and like Fincher and stuff like that, like you mentioned. I mean, Kevin Spacey, Robin Wright for House of Cards, Kate Mara, Corey Stoll.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing just how much of the talent they get, and that's basically a testament to how popular TV has gotten within the last 10 years, and just how much better it is than most most movies like Fargo and stuff like that. Another great television series, Breaking Bad, kind of started that, and but Netflix TV, like, they just have a really good grip on it, I think, because they're able to stretch out their content over like multiple episodes instead of just like a small increment of like an hour and a half to 2 hours, because their films usually aren't that long. But now that they have time to sort of like focus on one story for an hour, focus on another continuation of that story for another hour, and span that out over 8 to 10 episodes for multiple seasons, like, that's where I feel like they're spot is, and that's where they hit that home run most of the time. And it's kind of amazing when you contrast that to the films that they make.
Yeah, comparing them, TV, when Netflix releases a new TV show, like a big name TV show, that's an event. People are talking about how they're going to spend an entire weekend binge watching it. Whereas when they release something like Mute, and I guess you could say Cloverfield Paradox was an event, but that's more, I think you can attribute that more to the marketing rather than the quality of it, because with their TV shows, it's both the marketing, but it's also the quality that keeps people binging it. Because with a TV show, if it's not a good TV show, they're not going to watch a second episode. But if it is a good TV show, like Stranger Things, or like one of my personal favorites, one of my personal Netflix original favorites is the series of Unfortunate Events TV show. I finished that in a weekend, and I finished Stranger Things in a weekend, and the type of quality that they're putting into the TV shows just keeps hooking people back, and it creates such a buzz and a hype within the pop culture world that it's almost I just blanked on the word, but it's like one of those self-sustaining things that people keep coming back to it.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like, if Netflix, like I said earlier, reevaluates like their business model and tries to figure out what their identity is going to be, if they focus more on just being like the streaming service for great TV, the TV is only going to get better if they just focus on that. In a way, it like kind of defeats like what they're trying to accomplish with like film and filmmakers who are more smaller time. But I just feel like if your home is TV, just be TV and keep those films on there that we've seen a million times before for convenience sake. Because sometimes if I don't want to turn on my Blu-ray player and grab my Blu-ray disc. I'll just pop it on Netflix. It's the same thing. So, yeah, it's really weird what Netflix is doing right now in terms of like good and terrible. And it's like their TV stuff, man, is just so impressive. That Mindhunter season 2 is just cannot come soon enough. I cannot wait. So,
I mean, when we've gotten to the point where people would rather have a Netflix account over an HBO subscription, which back in the day, it's the pinnacle, right? It's the pinnacle of premium TV, where now a service where you pay $8-something a month can battle and beat HBO TV shows. And that's not to shit on the HBO TV shows, because they're creating some excellent stuff.
yeah.
That means you've done pretty well for yourself, Netflix. And we're like the disappointed parents who know that they can do better, because we've seen them do better.
Yeah, exactly. And, I really appreciate Netflix, and I think that a lot of the things they do are really admirable and really great for the era that we're in for entertainment. And, I didn't even mention this earlier, but even look at a studio like Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime now, if you subscribe to Amazon Prime, you get a lot of great benefits. Plus, you can hook that up with your Twitch Prime account, get cool Fortnite skins, and it's like you're getting so much stuff, right? So
I was wondering if you were bringing that up. I knew it was coming.
But like you get all these great benefits, and I feel like Netflix they offer a lot of really good content and a lot of really bad content, but sometimes it's like, is it worth like this $14 a month if you want to get like the 4K package as well, which is always great to watch on my TV specifically. And it's like HBO, like they have Westworld and Game of Thrones and all this stuff, and it's like Amazon Prime Studios, they've got Oscar nominated films left and right. Even one of their films had the best actor of last year, and it's like they have so much less film content, and it's like that's Amazon's identity. They do little things at a time, and they just take it step by step, whereas Netflix is like, let's just take one giant leap for mankind, except like they never touch down on the moon again. They just drift off into space. But that's...
Well, they tried to go back to the moon, and then when they tried to go back to the moon, they got mute. So
yeah, that is true. That is fair.
Can you tell that I haven't paid for my Netflix account in a while, because I thought it was $8 and you just said it was $14? So can you tell that I don't actually pay for my own Netflix account? I use somebody else's, just like every cheap student would.
No, I mean, well, it's $14 for the 4 screens and the 4K, but I think it's like $13 for like 4 screens without 4K, and I think it's $8 for 2 screens. Maybe, I don't know. They have so many different types of packages.
Yeah, I have no idea. I haven't paid for Netflix for the amount of time I've had it, so
yeah.
Well, that seems like a good place to end the episode. Once again, Netflix, we love you if you're listening. But we just expect a little bit more. Roman, where can the people find you, your writing and your stuff when you're not playing Fortnite?
You can find me rarely on the internet now, because I'm so engulfed in Fortnite. If you want, send me a friend request on PlayStation. We can hit up some Fortnite. FPS __champ. Please, PlayStation, allow me to change that in the future. And then you can find me at Roman's Movie Reviews on Facebook. I'm writing reviews there every week. Wrinkle in Time next week. I'm pretty excited about that one. And then you can find me just writing independently on Vocal Media, like vocal.com, I believe. And you can check out my article, which should be up within the next 48 hours. The Netflix Paradox, Netflix's lack of quality control, a look into Netflix's path down a slippery slope that could harm their brand. I enjoyed it. I had a good time with writing that one, and you can check that out and let me know what you think there. And thank you, Matthew, for having me on. We're gonna get off and try and catch some dubs before I go to work, but thank you once again. It was a joy.
Yeah, it was my pleasure to have you on. We got to do this again sometime. If you made it all the way to the end of the episode, thank you for listening. Yeah. This has been most of the episodes are now just end up being 40 minutes. I might just change it to a 40-minute podcast, to be honest, but that might mean I'll push to 50 minutes.
Yeah.
This podcast can be found anywhere you listen to podcasts, on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, even YouTube, if you so choose to listen to podcasts on YouTube, but I don't know if anybody does that. I do have something new and cool coming up. My website is live currently, but it's not completely finished. But if you guys want to check that out, it's matthewchinquee.pagecloud.com. I'll leave the link in the description. It'll have links to all the podcast episodes, plus some cool things that I put in there with the icons. I don't know. It took me a long time, and I'm really proud of it. It's just, people check that out. And there will be a blog in there that will have supplementary stuff to the podcast if you so choose to read and listen to my voice a little bit more. So check that out if you can. I'll throw all those links in the description, including Roman's article when it's out. I'll throw that in there. But until next week, I will chat with you guys later.